Good morning, everyone. This is Father Kramer here, and I am unboxing a new liturgical book that I just got, and this is the Divine Office Hymnal. This is the first published section of the new translation of the Liturgy of the Hours. It's available from GIA Liturgical Publications, and I just called them and ordered it. You can order online, I think, as well, although online they didn't have the media mail option, which is a lot cheaper shipping rate, and it came pretty fast anyway. So I recommend giving them a call and ordering yourself a copy. The rest of the Liturgy of the Hours is not yet come out. It's translated, it's done, but they're waiting, to the best of my understanding, on the sections that are from the Sacred Scriptures, direct quotations from the New American Bible, which is under some revisions right now. And so that is what we're waiting upon. But in the meantime, this is the first installment of the new translation. And I wanted to look through a little bit what's in it. First of all, the work of translation is always done from the typical edition, the official book from Rome. And so within, let's talk specifically about the hymns. Within the typical edition of the Liturgy of the Hours, each hour has its own specific hymn. Obviously, there are ones that are more specific and others that are less specific. For the 4-week Psalter for morning prayer and evening prayer, there's 2 different weekly cycles. So weeks 1 and 3 have the same hymn at each hour, and then weeks 2 and 4 have the same hymn at each hour. When we get into the saints, then the hymns become more specific and often are related specifically to the life of the saint. The distinction between our older translation of the Liturgy of the Hours and our newer one is that the old one had some of the hymns from the typical edition, sometimes in Latin, other times translated, but often it doesn't have them at all. In the new translation of the Liturgy of the Hours, all of the hymns will have been, or as we can see in this book, are translated. So there's some great benefits that will come from this. At first, there will be some learning curve of not knowing the hymns, not always knowing the melodies. But I think once we overcome that, once we take the time to learn, that a lot of benefit will come from it. This Divine Office Hymnal is based off of course, the Liturgy of the Hours, the typical edition. That's where the text comes from. But then there's also the musical notation, and also, in this essence, the layout of the book. And that comes from this book put out by the monks of Salem Monastery. Most of the work of editing of Gregorian chant and of both the text and of the melodies has been done for the last several hundred years by Salem. They're kind of the world premier experts on the subject matter. And so this book was published after the Second Vatican Council, and it includes all the melodies that are attached to the texts in the Liturgy of the Hours. This is often the case with our liturgical books. Sometimes there are Vatican melodies, but often the melodies of these ancient hymns come down to us through Salem Monastery. They're the ones that did the research and did the additions to try and systematize and organize these chants. So let's take a look at the layout of the book a little bit. I'm just going to focus on some parts of it, as otherwise this will get too long. So let's look at our, I didn't set my pages yet. So let's say that today is the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, but let's say that we were just celebrating just the Thursday in ordinary time. It would be week 3 of the Psalter. So to find your place in the Liber Hymnarius, you need to look and see what week are we in. So here, hebdomade prima et tertia, and so that means week 1 and 3, and then feria quinta is Thursday. So then we find, let's say we're going to pray evening prayer. So we find Vespers. And so there's our hymn. So when we're in weeks 1 and 3, our hymn is for Vespers there. If we look in this new Divine Office hymnal, it is set up in the same way. And so ordinary time, weeks 1 and 3, Thursday, and I want to go to evening prayer. Within this edition, you'll see that that there are both a Gregorian chant melody, which comes directly from the Liber Hymnarius. It's the same melody. And then also, these are all in long meter, which means, for instance, the tune, the Old Hundredth, which we recognize, is one of maybe 120 or 150 different long meter tunes that are there. And so these can all be sung to the long meter tune, especially if we don't yet know the plain chant tunes, although these tunes are very simple. They're not going to be difficult to learn. There's a great beauty in these hymns that are tied to the 4-week Psalter, especially for evening prayer. If you recall, in the Spirit of the Liturgy by Pope Benedict XVI, he talks in some of the earlier chapters about the cosmic dimension of the liturgy, how the entire universe is God's temple, and it's created to give him praise and glory. And so, in a certain sense, our church and our worship of God in the church is like a microcosm of that. And so these hymns in the 4-week cycle of the Psalter, the ones that we would pray during ordinary time, during the evening prayer, they tie us to the cosmos. They tie us in a particular way to the day of the week and in regards to the day of creation. And so we see on this Thursday that then corresponds with the 5th day of creation, that that plunged in waters and submerged, or borne aloft to heavenly heights, the offspring of a single stalk may grow and fill their proper place. So seeing how God populates on that 5th day of creation, both the seas and the sky. And so it ties us to the worship of God that's carried out throughout the universe by all of creation. And it gives a certain specificity to what we're doing. It ties us to the hour of the day as well in a more profound sort of way. As we recall from the general instruction of the liturgy hours, that the purpose of the liturgy hours is to extend to the hours of the day the worship of the Mass. And so the Mass is obviously the most important prayer we pray every day, but after that is the liturgy of the hours. And so the use of these hymns, I think, will enrich our prayer of the liturgy of the hours. I'd also like to point out the daytime hours, that the great benefit of using these hymns from the typical edition is the specificity. If you look at the hymns for daytime prayer, we're going to look at the ones for weeks 2 and 4. We keep the order of the day with loving heart and earnest prayer. At this 3rd hour, we humbly beg the glory of your threefold power. That's the prayer for terce or mid-morning prayer. Midday prayer, let us sing praises to the Lord with willing mind and fervent heart. The noonday hour returns again and summons us once more to prayer. And then for noon, the mid-afternoon 3 times, the cycle of the hours returns to us by gift of God. Let us devoutly sing to him who is the perfect 3 in 1. And so these hymns tie us to the hour of the day. As we pray this, the 3 hours of midday prayer, maybe we only pray one, but we can select the appropriate hymn for the hour. And this recalls a connection to the Jewish worship in the temple. We know that in the Acts of the Apostles, there's evidence in the text there that the apostles went up to the temple 3 times to pray during the middle of the day. There's always there's really the morning prayer, the morning sacrifice, the evening sacrifice, and that's our lauds and our vespers are tied to that. But then between those 2 turning points of the day in the temple, there were 3 times of prayer. And so we're connected to the apostles. We're connected to that which preceded the Christian faith, our foundations within the Jewish religion. And again, it ties us to time. It ties us to how God is permeating our day with his grace. And so maybe this seems like a small thing, but I don't think it's unimportant. And the history of the church, I think, indicates that the tying ourselves to like God's incarnation, his coming into every aspect of the day is pretty important. Another benefit of this new edition is the work for the saints. Today is the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, and if we look at our current breviary, our current translation, we'll see when we get to the hymn for the office of readings that we need to go to the Common of Apostles. So we go to the Common of Apostles, and there we have a hymn. Your hand, O Lord, has guided your church from age to age. The wondrous tale is written so clearly on each page. Our fathers praised your goodness, and we their deeds record. And both to this bear witness, one church, one faith, one Lord. Of course, that's not a bad hymn at all, but there is no mention of St. Paul. It's a very generic hymn, and it works for any apostle. If we go now to our new hymnal, this is a hymn that, of course, is in the typical edition and that now has been translated, that we have access to. Hard pressed beneath a weight of ills, we come, O Paul, with humble prayer. From heaven's treasure you will give sure pledges of God's saving power. For struck by God's all-loving hand and stirred by that divine assault, with strong embrace you championed those you once pursued with vicious hate. Be mindful of us still, we pray. Do not forget your former love, and lead us back who languish here to steadfast hope in heaven's grace. Now by your prayers may love abound, a charity that knows no harm, that barbs of strife cannot assail, that error cannot strike or wound. O victim pleasing heaven on high, and for all nations light and love, O Paul, we call upon your name, our glorious patron, guard, and guide. May hymns of lasting glory rise to God at the blessed three in one, and may he crown us one with you, our prize for faith's good battles won. But often there is some reference to the life of the saint in these hymns, and also the particular virtues that an example that they give to us in living the Christian faith. A further benefit of the possibility of doing these hymns to a variety of plain chant or plain song melodies is they move a little faster. We're in the habit of not singing always the hymn for the liturgy hours, even though it's an integral part of the liturgy of the hours. The hymn is native to the liturgy of the hours. We look at the Mass, and for the Mass, there's only a small handful of hymns. The Gloria, the Holy Holy, even the Agnus Dei is really a litany. And the native music to the Mass is an antiphon. An antiphon one does as long as is needed, and then puts sections of the Psalms in between to stretch it as long as is needed. Whereas a hymn, by its very structure, is meant to be sung start to finish. It has a certain number of verses. And so when we put them in the Mass, there's a certain tension there. We have the sense we should finish it, yet on the other hand, that's really not the structure of the Mass, that we just stand there and sing a hymn, except for in the case of the Gloria. But in the case of the Liturgy of the Hours, we do just stand there and sing the hymn. So if the melody is really long and arduous, that makes it hard. It feels like a burden to sing the whole hymn. So perhaps the learning of some of these melodies will assist in that. Also, I would say in common knowledge, we know maybe 2 long meter, maybe 3 long meter hymn tunes in plain chant and Gregorian chant. With this book, there's the opportunity to learn a lot of new melodies.